At the time of this taping, Game 7 has not yet happened for the Raptors and the Celtics. So we don't know what the outcome is going to be. If you're watching this after and it's already happened, just fair statement. We're not completely out to lunch. We're just earlier than lunch. The question becomes, based on how much Kyle Lowry has carried this team in these playoffs on a bum ankle, how much up the pecking order of Toronto sports teams, favorite players, leaders, all that kind of stuff, how much up that pecking order has he climbed in the last year and a half? Let's dive down that rabbit hole. Rick Zamperin, we can go through a list of, and I'm just talking modern era, but we can go through a list of guys like Sittler and Salming and Bautista and Carter and the other Carter and Doug Flutie, and there's a decent list of players who have played for Toronto sports teams in the modern era, as I say. Where is Kyle Lowry finding himself on that list these days?
I think it's very high. I think when you look at, some of the biggest stars in Toronto sports history, obviously, a number of Maple Leafs come to mind, a number of Blue Jays, as you mentioned. Doug Flutie, maybe the all-time greatest CFL player, if not the greatest Argo. There's some debate around that for sure. You can throw TFC, whether it's Michael Bradley or Josie Altidore or Sebastian Giovinco, but Kyle Lowry's got to be up there. Number one, he has a championship ring, and yes, I know Kawhi Leonard was a big part of that, but so is Pascal Siakam and Norm Powell and Fred VanVleet. It's a team sport. But without Kyle Lowry, I'm not sure the Raptors, A, are a 50-win team repeatedly over the last number of years, and B, I don't think they're even in this position in the NBA bubble. They've been one of the best teams since arriving in the bubble, swept Brooklyn with ease, got injured in that last game, has come back and has been the best, hands down, Raptor in this second-round series against Boston. And you have to consider him among, if not the all-time best Raptor, certainly in the top three. There's no doubt about that. Vince Carter would be there for me, Kyle Lowry for sure, and probably DeMar DeRozan, with some apologies to a few other guys because they've had some pretty good players. But Kyle Lowry, definitely one of the top sports stars in Toronto history.
Steve?
Well, again, what do you, first of all, can we get the operating procedure here? What do we call a modern era?
Well, I'm not going back to like Charlie Conacher or Sil Apps. I mean,
okay, so that's that. So you take out a lot of players there,
mostly because Steve, we never saw. Yeah, we never saw those guys at all. You may have, but we never did.
So I saw a few of them. I never saw. But I did catch a game or two of Teeter Kennedy when I was really, really young, and so you've got to wipe all of those people out when the Leafs were actually winning a lot of cups then, and there was really only two games in town, the Leafs and the Argos in those days, in horse racing, right? And that was basically it. One of the things I think I agree with Rick I would say with every point that he made there, and I think the thing about Kyle is that he plays in a sport in which one player can make a difference. Right, and the problem with the other big sports in town is that one player can carry a team and he can be the great guy and the big star and all of those kinds of things, but they come off the field. Basketball players play much of the game. There are only, let's say, 6 or 7 of them that really make a difference, where there's always, in hockey, the best players only play 20 to 25 minutes. So it really, reduces the sort of impact that they can have. The other thing about Lowry is that he's grown. He's one of those people that have grown in our public consciousness and grown in our elections, because a lot of people didn't like him, don't forget, at first. He's one of those guys who kind of
had no idea who he was.
A lot of people had no idea how he was, and he sort of sometimes looked sulky and all of those kinds of things. He was always playing second fiddle, not necessarily second fiddle if you knew the game, but if you sort of watched the personalities on the floor and who was getting all the ink and the attention. There was always 1 or 2 players ahead of him, including DeRozan, of course, and everybody on the Raptors for many, many years. And it's only last year that it finally happened, has always played under the shadow of Carter. And because he started this whole thing in terms of awareness. I think the fact that we're discussing this and putting Lowry so high, I'd say in the last 30 years, he's probably in the top 2 or 3.
Ooh, I don't know about Bub. What do you think? Top 2 or 3?
I put him third or fourth.
Well, I'd
say where basketball is. Don't forget where basketball is. It's got a broader base than hockey, believe it or not. Broader base, not deeper.
What
Yeah,
do you think, Bubs?
and I'm totally with Steve on that one too. They start carving the statue already right now because he's the greatest Raptor we've ever seen. Vince put the team on the map, didn't have the longevity, plus half the fan base don't like him because of the way his history ended with the team, and people will never forgive him for that. Kyle Lowry has grown with us. The most successful decade of this franchise's history is with Kyle Lowry either being 1A or 1B in terms of either DeRozan or a guy like Kawhi Leonard, again, who will be one of the greatest Raptors ever, but because of his longevity, we will never have the same love for Kawhi. We will always thank Kawhi for what he did in showing us the way, but now with the longevity of Kyle Lowry, the fact that he's a diminutive kind of guy, a kind of guy, like you said, maybe wasn't the nicest guy when he came here, wasn't really maybe happy to be here in some ways because of the way his history went with with Memphis and Houston, always kind of chip on his shoulder. Hey, he's listed at 6 feet. He's probably 5'10", little guy syndrome, if you want to call it that. But this guy has been something so spectacular. He puts his body on the line. He leads when necessary, allows others to lead when necessary. This has become a great story, and I think it's fantastic that the NBA now are seeing how great Kyle Lowry is. But in terms of Toronto sports lore, I think top 10 all time. I'm already putting him there, and to a different generation, much different than us guys, I'm going to put him in maybe at number 1.
Well, okay, so first of all, about your point about the size of him, one thing that works for him so well is if you look at other cities, they love their skilled, high, silky smooth stars. Go to Montreal, they like Bellevaux, and they like Lafleur, and they like – Toronto has always been the city whose favorite players are the scrappy, grindy, undersized, overcomers, you know, the Gilmores and the –
High Doomies.
Whoever you like. And so he fits exactly with that. He's not 6'9" and super athletic and looks like it's easy for him. So Lowry, in a Toronto-centric thing, has an advantage of being able to hold that mantle. The one question I have about him, Bubba, I have him in my top 10. I don't have him quite as high as Steve, and you know, and
I think more top 5 for me than top 3 for sure. Yeah.
But my question is to ultimately find yourself as one of those guys. Do you have to have a signature moment? Kawhi had the signature moment, the Game 7 shot against Philadelphia. Bautista had the home run. Carter had the home run. You know, go down the list. Gilmore had the wraparound goal against St. Louis. Does Lowry need to have, ultimately, before he's done, that moment that you can crystallize his career in Toronto down to one play to really grab that mantle?
No, I don't know about that, Scott. I mean, first of all, did you not see that turnaround jumper in the last shot that he's taken in the last game? That certainly goes on the list. I just finished watching, as we do our taping this morning, a top 10 list of Kyle Lowry moments, which are absolutely unbelievable, incredible moments that go into the top 10 of Raptor lore. So I think he's had several moments like that. Whether we choose to remember them or not is a different thing. And many of them, in terms that happened last year, led this team to a championship. You got to also remember that when Kawhi did not play because of him taking rest and what was the saying? Him not playing?
Maintenance days.
Load management.
Load management. Remember this team was 17-5 in 22 games that Kawhi Leonard did not play, and he was generally leading scorer in many of those games. But in terms of individual moments, he's had plenty of them, but I don't know if that leads you to greatness. First of all, a championship leads you to greatness in terms of being remembered as an all-time great, in which many of the people, like we just named, Domi, Gilmore, Anderchuk, Sittler, these guys don't have championships. Kyle Lowry does.
Well, the one guy.
I agree with you. Let me just jump 1 second. Sure. I agree with you, Bubba, that you don't need to have the championships matter, but to crystallize a guy's career, I just always wonder if that's something that has helped to build that legend, to have that one moment.
I think it's more difficult in basketball to have that one moment. Think about the top basketball moments ever. More often than not, they're buzzer beaters. Kawhi had one last year. That was the first Game 7 buzzer beater in NBA history. They're few and far between. I can think of LeBron's block in the NBA Finals as Cleveland was going back from 3-1 to beat Golden State. But really beyond that, maybe a Larry Bird big shot, once in a while, a Kareem Abdul-Jabbar skyhook. They've been few and far between. I think hockey's more conducive to a big goal or an overtime winner because that's the finality of the game and it's bound to happen. But buzzer beaters and game sevens or championship moments, there's not many of them.
No, and actually the person that's probably had the biggest impact at the moment and during a period of time that you don't necessarily look back and say, because they didn't win, is Wendell Clark. So because of the way he grabbed the city on and off the ice at 3 different times in his career. And that was always an irony to me that they took so long in Toronto to understand Scott's point about the star factor is a big point in Toronto. It's always been that way. Shaq was more popular than Mahovlich, for instance. Keon, the hardworking guy, was much more popular than the more flamboyant guys on the team. Clark was more popular for many, many, many years, and probably entirely through than Sundin was, a much better player. But I think part of it is also on review when you start thinking. A lot of people who didn't notice Lowry as much but sort of felt his presence as they became basketball fans, over time when they're looking back at it, particularly if they should win again this year or make it to the finals again this year, in which case they'll have to say this is a pretty good looking run of teams here. We've only had really one great run in Toronto in the last 30 or 40 years, and that was the Jays from 83 to 93, right? That was 10 years of being there as a contender almost every year, including 83 when they had a shot till Baltimore got a hold of them. So I think Lowry will grow in that way because we'll have come to appreciate basketball more as it gets deeper and deeper into our national psyche, and we'll look back and sort of understand what he did. So yes, maybe he doesn't have the signature moment, but he does have that championship, and no Leaf has a championship, and I'm not sure when they ever will.
Let's go around the queue here for a second. Bubba, I'll start with you, and I'm getting you cold on this one. I gave you no warning, just so people at home know. If Bubba's eyes suddenly glaze because suddenly he's in a panic, who would be, I don't care if it's your 3 or your 5, going back 50 years. So, well, even maybe a little more than that. We'll go back, if you want to take it, we'll go back as far as Dave Keon, because that seems to be – who would be in your list of either top 3 or top 5 Toronto team players? We won't go with individuals, team guys. Who would be in your top 3 or top 5?
You're actually talking about the teams?
The players on those teams. Who, like, we're talking about Lowry, whether he fits in your top 3 or your top 5. Who would be on that list? You don't even have to give it necessarily in a complete one.
I think of the Blue Jays, you're looking at the combo, of course, Joe Carter and what he did. I mean, one of 2 people in Major League Baseball to hit a walk-off home run in a World Series. I think Robbie Alomar slips in that category for the Blue Jays all-time greatest. I think you talk about Flutie with the Argonauts, and I don't know if really I know he had some spectacular years here and won a Grey Cup, but when I think of Doug Flutie, I don't think of him pretty much as an Argo. I think of him as a Lion and a Calgary Stampeder for some reason. I don't know why. But and of course the Maple Leafs. We talked about the Gilmores and of course Wendell Clarks. And now I think with the Raptors, I think DeRozan, I think Vince Carter, and I think Kyle Lowry as guys that are the all-time greatest.
Rick?
Yeah, I think the only ones that I would add to those lists would be those underdog fan favorites, the Ty Domies, the Wendell Clarks, the Johnny Bowers, Pinball Clemens, a bunch of other guys on Toronto FC, whether it's Javinko or Michael Bradley. That's basically the lexicon of the all-time greatest Toronto athletes. Dave Keon's in there for sure. The best of the best, Gilmore, obviously, Sundin. That is basically your top 10.
If I was looking at the sort of players that who were the best, I think I just quickly jotted down here. I'd go with Alomar 1. I think Sundin, Carter, and Pinball in there in terms of that. But in terms of impact at the time, I think Gilmore, because of that 3 years in there, the impact on the time on the psyche of the city would be 1. Alomar / Carter 2, because you can't separate them. Carter had the punctuation moment. Alomar wrote the whole sentence. And 3, Vince, because he was there, like love him or hate him, he was there, right? I mean, he was the Raptors, for a whole period of time, negative and positively. And I would put Lowry right in that group and Clark. So in terms of impact at the time with the general fandom, not just the individual sport fandom, and that's what we're going to have to start separating out a little bit for the Leafs here, and for baseball too, because it's not necessarily a general fandom for everybody now. Even for the Raptors, they're not general fandom until they get this deep. Yeah,
just think back a few years ago when they couldn't beat LeBron and what people thought about the Raptors then. I had the advantage that I knew this was coming, so I got a list. Here's my list of 10 that I would say for Toronto teams, and you can add to it because I know last night when Rick and I were chatting about this, he added some that I hadn't even thought of. Alomar, as you said, Gilmore, Sittler, Jose Bautista, Joe Carter, Kawhi, Vince Carter, Dave Keon, Pinball Clemens. And that means, for me, somewhere in there, I'm not sure who of those I bump out to make room for Kyle Lowry. I would have him at 11, and maybe now you move him past Kawhi. Kawhi had that moment. Kawhi was great, but as far as maybe he's the guy now. I don't know, or maybe you move him past Vince because of Vince Carter's.
Well, just on that Kawhi thing, he's already well past Kawhi, even a year later.
I agree.
So,
yeah, me too.
Anyway, what do you think? Sorry, Bob, finish and then we'll go to it.
I would say to you there, Scott, that again, we're getting some rocking down dangerous territory right now because of our ages, guys. And remember, we've got 2 or 3 generations that are behind us right now that don't even know who Doug Gilmour is.
Or Joe Kroll or Teddy Kennedy.
Exactly. They have no
on my list.
Key on it. They have no reason even closer to our hearts and Daryl Sittler and Lanny McDonald and those teams. They have
Google
no
these names,
clue.
kids. Google them.
All you got to do at our 4 workplaces or 3 workplaces, guys, you just got to talk to some of the younger people that have no clue who these people are. So we're in a situation right now. We're not getting pushed out. But names like Lowry and names like Kawhi are bigger than any of those names right now, with a generation of kids or young adults that never even saw those guys play. They're nothing more than a YouTube link or something they heard guys like us talk about.
Bubba, well, you know what? I was going to go because we're running short of time, but I would say to that's true. I don't disagree with you because we do live in a time where basically our memory doesn't even allow us to remember what we had for breakfast, let alone what we did last week or last year. But when Steve was growing up, or when Rick was growing up, or when you were growing up, we knew who the guys were. We knew who Turk Broda was, or we knew who Wilt Chamberlain was, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's ridiculous to think that somehow in a generation or two that the entire history of sports also, that they are incapable of grasping that there was greatness before they arrived on the scene. Maybe we're that narcissistic now, but I think that we can look at the guys who are playing today as great, like Lowry, but we can also recognize history and do a little and recognize that, Grandpa, not necessarily us, only one of us, Steve, but Grandpa talks about this guy who was really good. Maybe he was really good. Maybe Grandpa's not just an old fart that doesn't know anything about sports because he never saw this. I'm with you. I think there's a lot of people who may share that view. I think it's part of the sports thing, and always has been, to also go back and look at the greats. If you're a sports fan, you also study who the greats are and you learn about them, and you know.
Most of the people can't do that without video. So pre-video, pre-copious video. There's not even enough video on Gretzky, quite frankly.
No.
Available. I mean, you might see Bale's greatest goal, but there's just a horde of it like there is out there now.
My favorite player all time is Shorty Green. Best player I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, 1925?
That's right. Who do you think? Who have we left off the list? Who should be in the top 10 of Toronto team athletes? Or where should Kyle Lowry go in that? He is, let's see, on my list, he is the only active player, which means he has a chance to move up still. Where is he on that list? Someone said he might be top 2 or 3. I say probably into the top 10. Let us know. Our Twitter handles are on the screen. You can contact us. They'll be up at the end as well. We would love to hear from you. We would love for you to subscribe down below so you see these videos when they come out. Have a great day. We'll talk to you soon.